Good evening, Britannia, and hello to the rest of the world. Welcome back to the channel with the latest update from England, specifically the National Health Service. Well, these days, the International Health Service, with all the tourists and foreigners who come and use the NHS, the healthcare system in this country without paying for it. And the taxpayer will have to pay for it for what? For all the managers and bureaucrats and the admin to get a lot of money. And then the diversity officers, the DEI managers, to recruit woke staff for the NHS, and in this case, an actual pro-jihadi Islamist. In this video, we're going to give you an update on what's going on with one of the doctors of the NHS. Okay, let's start from the beginning. There is an organization called Hizb ut-Tahrir. Now, Hizb ut-Tahrir is very much banned, is very much illegal in this country, although it was very much allowed to do whatever it wants, including promoting the black flag of Islam that they want to plant on top of Buckingham Palace in Downing Street, until January. About 6-7 months ago, James Cleverly managed to prescribe this organization, to ban it, say this is an illegal organization, stop it. Some of you are already familiar with CCTV going to these protests, filming them. Do you remember these banners? Muslim armies? These were the Hizb ut-Tahrir people. These were that organization. They used to make speeches and basically saying Sharia for the world, dominate the world, and Islamism is good, blah blah blah. And it got a little bit complicated because of all the threats against the Jews and Christians. They've had all these protests, literally supporting Hezbollah. That woman in purple saying we are all Hezbollah while she's on her way to KFC. Now all this has been going on, right? Daily Mail managed to expose a doctor who works for the NHS, Northeast London. They call him Abdul Wahid, right? Abdul Wahid has been exposed as one of the leaders of this banned organization. His real name is in fact Wahid Asif Shaida. That's his actual name. He was not clear with the NHS or with anybody about his double life. Patients at the suburban surgery in northwest London had no idea of Wahid's double life as the UK's head of a global extremist group. Not just a supporter of the Palestinian movement who goes to these protests. No. The guy has links, all right? He was suspended by the NHS after the expose by the Mail. This is a while ago. The NHS England decided to do an investigation after suspending him. And then they decided to clear him. He's fine. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. It's a banned illegal organization, right? We do have a statement from this, obviously, the NHS England panel that decided to say, it's okay, he can continue whatever he wants to do. A London spokesman from the NHS said, we take any issues relating to professional conduct seriously and have procedures in place to make sure that individuals are fit to work in the NHS. Following a thorough investigation, the evidence regarding Dr. Shaida's conduct and practice was considered by the NHS England panel at an oral hearing on the 11th of July last week, in accordance with regulations and published policy. No evidence was found that he has had involvement with Hizb ut-Tahrir since the organization was proscribed. The panel found that there was insufficient evidence to warrant removing Dr. Shaida from the performers list, but decided that conditions should be imposed to manage a safe return to practice for both staff and patients. I'm going to explain the biggest problem with this story in a second, because they finished by saying that Dr. Shaida is therefore able to return to practice subject to those conditions. But then we discovered that he was doing fundraising. He raised a lot of money, about £51,000, saying Abdul Wahid Shaida needs your help. Ooh, give me money. He raised so much money. What a grifter. Love it. And then the NHS England basically came back and said, Well, since January, when James Cleverly, as Home Secretary, banned this organization, there's no evidence that he's been part of it since. Hang on. This is where bureaucracy goes too far. You shouldn't get rid of him just because he's part of now a banned organization, because they're saying he's no longer part of it, right? He was until January. When it was banned, he left, apparently, right? You shouldn't ban him if he were still involved with Hizb ut-Tahrir. You should ban him because he was once a member of it. Even if he's not now publicly, let's just say, right now he's no longer publicly associated with this organization. But he was once. We know their agenda. We know their ideology. Do you really think since James Cleverly banned this organization in the UK in January 2024, he's suddenly become a good person? He's suddenly realized, I now like Britain. I don't like Jihad or Sharia. This is the problem. Because we talked about this yesterday or a couple of days ago when it came to Anjem Choudhury. I said, the issue that we have with the system, with the rule-based system that we have, is they are only able to prosecute you, for example, if you're an Islamist, if you are part of a now banned organization. So Anjem Choudhury, they managed to get him to be convicted because he was still being associated with certain groups. Not because he himself as an individual is a nutter. This is why there are loopholes that left-wing activist lawyers and Islamist lawyers are using against our system. If I were in charge, I wouldn't necessarily arrest you or deport you because you're part of a banned organization. I would judge you as an individual. If you, on your own, without being part of any illegal or banned organization, still believe in treason, you should still be arrested and deported. I don't understand why there's no radical reform right now in the state. Now we know because of the uniparty situation that we had since 1997, but we do need radicalism. And of course, if new parties like Reform UK are claiming to become radical going forward, it's their job to sort this out. It's the job of the existing Reform UK MPs to be on top of this story. And I know that they watch TCTV. I know they watch this channel, Reform UK. They need to speak out in the House of Commons about this problem. You shouldn't necessarily just go after people because they're associated with the group. If they themselves are nutters, that should be enough for you to be investigated at least. The NHS panel that decided to say, well, actually, Wahid Asif Shaida, despite the fact that he was a leader, he was the leader of this organization, banned organization, he can go back to work as a GP, as a local GP, a doctor in the NHS in London. This is the same NHS, our lovely healthcare system, that refused to treat a Jewish boy, a teenage boy, because he was Jewish. Remember that story that we reported a few months ago? This is the same NHS that has enough doctors and nurses working for it who go to protests and chant from the river to the sea. Do you really think if a Jewish patient goes to this doctor, he will be treated correctly by this doctor? Northwest London, by the way. He's based in Northwest London. There's a lot of Jews there. Can you trust him with access to people's private information, health records? But it's okay because according to the NHS, he's no longer being associated with that group because it's been banned since January. Something is not right and it has to be addressed. Let's go to the comments. No one in particular says, one of the reasons I retired from the NHS slightly early was this, clearly. It's who you know, not what you know. If you do wrong for some demographics. No comment saying that either the NHS is in dire need of doctors or patients. This way, they get both. Mandrinka says, it's too late, Britain. The swarm is upon you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Read the Bible. Nothing you can do about it. Doesn't feel good. Richard says that this government just goes along with liars as it's part of the government's plan. The thing is, it goes beyond the government now, because when we talk about the NHS or civil service, that's the state. You got the state, you got the government, they're all as bad as each other, and you could say at times the state is worse than the government. The government is the elected part, of all the government ministers and the parties. But at least we have some control over the government part, some control in terms of voting for parties. Not full control because of the system, but we have no say over who is running the state. From civil service, bureaucrats, to Quangos, to the NHS, to the BBC, all these organizations, HS2, everything else that we have. You have no say over who's going to be your doctor. If you're watching this from abroad, you will be shocked to hear that the National Health Service in this country doesn't give you patient choice. It's absolutely disgusting. That's just one of the problems, by the way. There's so many issues in terms of outcome of treatment. It's one of the lowest compared to other countries with universal healthcare systems. Envy of the world, the left says. Biedeming just says, Churchill had to lock up the government to stop handing over to the National Socialists. He says, how can he still be a doctor in the NHS? He's taking the United Kingdom for a ride. But it's okay because apparently he's no longer associated with the banned organization Hizb ut-Tahrir. Really? The guy was the leader who was in charge. Now he's reformed himself because he was suspended by the NHS for 10 minutes? Apparently we're the troublemakers. Coffee Hunter says, a jihadist with access to British medical records? What could possibly go wrong? As I said, yeah, it literally has access to his private information, health records, and it's in northwest London. There's a lot of Jewish patients there, and others as well. And Paris says, will he go on to treat Jews? Surely it is a conflict of interests. Who wants to be treated by this creature? Problem is you have no patient's choice, so you're going to have to be treated by him. Unless you go private. Thank you, Peter Aaron, for your super chat saying, please put this towards some blue tack and stick William. Oh yeah, Gladstone, yeah. To your desk. He keeps wobbling about and it's making me nervous. I appreciate all the updates. Keep out. Actually, that's a good point. I've noticed sometimes when I move my hand, look. There you go. Look at it. Oh, look at it. He's dancing. Gladstone's dancing. Yeah, I need to do something about this. Thank you. That's also £10 for blue tack. That's going to be a very expensive blue tack. It's going to be very high quality blue tack. Oh, also, actually, I need to give a shout out to... Give me a minute. Big shout out to Lucy, who just before we went live gave us a £50 PayPal donation. That is very generous. Thank you very much for that. She did also leave a message, I believe, saying 27th of July. I can't be there, but I live somewhere safe in case you need it. Thank you very much, Lucy. There's been a lot of others as well, by the way, recently. Every now and then I have to give shout outs to all the PayPal people because I was a super chat, so you can see them here. Shana, Daniel, Robin, Vinayak, Seth, Trish, David, Abel, and Thomas Miller, Susan, Penelope, Michael. Thank you very much for all the support on PayPal as well. Alrighty-o. What's happening? Someone who speaks so openly about the hate for the people of the UK. How can we really think he cares about our health? He doesn't. He cares about getting paid. But that's it. You're right. This is why Parliament must be sovereign. At the very least, you can hold somebody to account. You need to get the state to become more accountable as well as Parliament. Casey says that they are being emboldened by the system itself. I no longer believe that there are any moderate Muslims. There are, of course, but they're mostly cultural Muslims. They're not practicing. But the authorities are still afraid to do anything that may upset or provoke them. That's the other thing, by the way. There's still a lot of, from the Islamic side, who are not necessarily terrorists or extremists in that sense. But because they've been brainwashed by the political left and by the whole culture, it's been completely chaotic. These are the ones who are not really crazy, right? These are like, they have their own views, but they live their lives normally. But the political establishment are also afraid, because if they offend them, they're going to start complaining too. So while there might not be terrorists, I'm not talking about every single person, by the way. Just don't do the whole Myers doing a stereotype. Obviously, there are different categories. You've got the cultural Muslims who are just like, born into it, but they're not practicing it, as long as they're more westernized. And there are those who can't publicly say we've left the religion because they'll be in trouble. As long as they don't practice it, and that's one of the main issues in terms of the ideology. But there are still a lot of them who you could call them Western, Muslims, cultural, moderate Muslims, whatever you want to call them, but they could still get offended and they would protest. And that's the problem. They won't necessarily come out to defend or support Anjem Choudhury, no, but they've been brainwashed by the political left that you are a victim. It's like the same thing with the BLM movement. They were going around telling every single black person, you're a victim. You should hate white people. Now, luckily, the BLM movement was a complete failure, and at its height, at its peak, in this country, we only had 7% of the black community actually supporting BLM. So that didn't work, did it? But that's what they do. They make you a victim. Forever, you're the victim. Anything wrong in your life is because of, I don't know, white people or Christians. It's disgusting. The 10 Commandments don't apply to Islam because it's a different belief with a different God. Yeah, of course, they don't necessarily consider that as part of it. They do mention the names Moses and Jesus, but as messengers. They're just messengers. They basically treat them as like intern prophets, not real prophets. It's interesting because the book itself is a fascinating book in terms of poetry, by the way, in terms of how it's written. But it does obviously mention, kind of slightly acknowledge the Moses story, Noah, and everything else. But then there's only one final word, one main prophet, and it becomes tricky to be able to integrate with Christians, with Christian West, whether you like it or not. I am an atheist and believe that the world would be a peaceful place without religion. I totally agree with what you're doing. I and my partner love your channel. The thing is, you can never have no religion, because it's part of humanity. You can hypothetically even get rid of or ban or eliminate the Abrahamic religions, but there will still be something, because there's always people questioning things in terms of life, death, where it started, the unknown, what's going to happen after. There's always that part of the psychology of humanity. That's why we always had something to worship. And liberal society that went too far towards liberal secularism. And generally speaking, I'm not talking about you, by the way, but a lot of other people in cosmopolitan areas who became more middle class and educated, they became less religious, and even culturally. They didn't have to be practicing religious, but culturally Christian. They became basically atheists. They thought that they no longer worship things, but they ended up finding new gods without knowing, whether it's materialism, whether it's new ideologies. And collectivism is basically the new way to identify people as a cult, as a religion, essentially. Collectivists. And it's mostly the liberal leftists who are in favor of collectivism. Same thing that the Abrahamic religions were saying, collectivism. Well, not all of them, obviously. Islam says it, and to an extent, Moses, but not fully. Obviously, Christianity wasn't really about that. It wasn't about collectivism. That's a whole different thing. Anyway, let's not get into that again. Martin says, it's religion or communism? Well, collectivism, basically, yeah. At least in terms of cultural values, it's either that or collectivism. It's tricky. He says, very rare, a medical professional will get sanctioned, no matter what they do. That is also a very good point when it comes to the NHS, because there are a number of questionable characters who work at the NHS. Not just those with woke views, but actually problematic people. And they don't seem to be accountable. There's no punishment, there's no accountability, and it's bad. The system is too big and too bureaucratic, and it's been infiltrated. All the admin, all the bureaucrats, all the people in charge, the managers. There are obviously good people working for the NHS. There are good doctors and good nurses, but they're being undermined by the rest of them. And some of them can't speak out. Crazy times. Anyway, that's the latest from the envy of the world, the National Health Service. If you joined us late, feel free to rewind back to the beginning of the live stream. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.